Hi, I'm Mark Von Drasek, and I'm a teacher at Evanston Township High School. And I'm making a series of episodes on something I call the quantum revolution of education. It's kind of based off some ideas I've been thinking about the last few years and what I talked about in a TEDx talk that'll be coming up later. Um, but I'm thinking about as we go back in person to school this past year and hearing so many people wanting to go back to normal, okay, to pre-COVID conditions. That was really kind of their goal for the school year. And I can't help but sit back and scratch my head asking, going back to normal, is that really what we want to do in education? Is that, is that in a condition that we want to go back to? Do we remember what it was like pre-COVID? So I seem to remember that pre-COVID, we had record numbers of students, of teens, who are suffering from things like anxiety and depression and being on medication, school shootings. One of the statistics that really breaks my heart is something where teens were feeling basically either sad or hopeless. And you can see it's a kind of a rise over the last 20 years, kind of gradual up until around 2017, 2018. And then it really starts to accelerate into the present era. So is that what we want for teens who are really struggling prior to COVID? Okay, and they're struggling even more after COVID. We've had historical problems, things like achievement gaps and opportunity gaps between, say, white students and students of color. And what these data show is some local data from a few years back in Evanston for elementary schools. And you can see how there's a significant gap, okay? Multi years worth of a gap of where white students were versus how many years later that it takes African American and Latino students to catch up to them in both reading and mathematics here. This isn't just a local problem. This is happening all over the country where you have diverse communities. And these have been here for decades with very little progress with the masses. And so when I see things like this, and I think in terms of where we are in education, where we've been really for the last 100 years or so, is we're in need not of any more reforms. I don't want to go back to just quick Band-Aid fixes or short-term goals. Try a program for a year. If it doesn't give you immediate results, move on to something else. Things like that have been happening in my entire nearly 30-year career in education. Instead, I'm thinking in terms of what Thomas Jefferson gave us. He mentioned and gave us some advice many years ago where a little rebellion now and then is a good thing. And I think this is where we need to go with education, not reform, but rebellion, a revolution. We need to mix things up and change how we're doing things because we have so many kids suffering, especially in terms of mental health. As COVID, if there's a positive thing that has come from COVID, it's the fact that it's showing us we've really been lagging behind in considering mental health and trying to place that on the same level as we do academics, as we do content and standardized testing. I think we all can agree that if a child isn't healthy in both mind and heart, they're probably not going to learn as much as they could. And so I'm glad that we're starting to recognize, both here and around the world, that mental health, that the whole child's health is really something that needs to be a priority now. And so with the series, each episode, which will be about 5 minutes or so long, will be dedicated to aspects of what I'm calling the quantum revolution. And it's something where I'm going to be inspired by some of the physics that I've studied in the past in quantum mechanics and how I think of human beings now in terms of how we treat particles and atoms in quantum mechanics. And try to make this argument that if we take on a new mindset, we can probably work wonders. We can start doing things we've never done before in education. So I'm just going to leave you with this thought and then build up on this on future video episodes. In order to have a revolution, two things have to happen up front. First, you have to identify the problem. And COVID has actually helped us do that. Okay. We know that a lot of teens and a lot of adults for that matter are hurting and they're not having the success that they should. And a lot of kids are being left behind in education. But then once we identify the problem, before you can act differently, I'm a firm believer that you have to think differently first before the actions can take place. Otherwise, you'll just keep acting and doing variations on a theme that you've tried before in the past, but they haven't panned out so well. So I'm going to be arguing for a quantum mindset. That's really where I'm going to be going with this. And if we think differently about kids, about how human beings think and learn, about what we do in the classroom and how we interact with kids, taking on a new mindset is really the first major step before we can actually start acting differently. And so having said all that, I'm going to wrap this one up and move on to a second episode, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.